Just a quick video to talk about still life painting. This is reinforcing what I covered in class. So as we look at the tradition of still life painting, we can look at somebody like Chardin, who's a great French still life painter, used objects that he had every day. And pretty much that's what still lifes are. You use everyday objects and you paint what you know. So that's why there's a timeliness to these, and you'll see as we get into the 20th century. But Chardin was a wonderful draftsman. So how he would set things up and just the lighting, they're very tonal, meaning there aren't a lot of bright colors, but he's a wonderful artist to look at for his lifelong use of this subject and how he painted things. Cezanne is an interesting artist for many reasons. We look at 20th century or modern art. Cezanne is referenced because he's sometimes referred to as the father of modern art. So you'll see more of a flattening out of space. Colors are a little more intensified, not as subdued. So that's another thing you'll see as you move into the 20th century. Also, there's somewhat of a use of the flat picture plane, or how the canvas comes through. You also see brush strokes. So there's this flattening out or an acknowledgement of the canvas and of the painting process, something you wouldn't really see necessarily so in Chardin. So there's this move to the kind of artificial nature of how paintings exist, or how they're conceived of and thought of as we move into the 20th century. Certainly when we get into the 20th century and you look at pop art and the influence of pop artists like Wayne Thiebaud. Thiebaud he's still alive. He's a West Coast painter. He became prominent in the 1960s, along with artists like Andy Warhol, in the period called pop art. So popular culture, everyday life, objects that were used, like in this case, a Dixie cup, or you'll see objects used from restaurants, fast food, and so on. In Warhol's work, you think about Andy Warhol using Campbell soup cans, Brillo boxes, things you would find in a grocery store. In Thiebaud's work, you'll see things you might find in the grocery store. So here you'll see cakes and pies painted beautifully, usually very thickly painted, bright colors though. The one thing I wanted to point out was how colors are used in Thiebaud's work. He's not afraid to use intense colors, especially in shadows. Normally you don't think of shadows having a lot of color, but in Thiebaud's work they really do amplify that. And here you can see even a thickly painted surface, a thick use of paint. We're not going to apply that in our assignment, our first assignment, but in Thiebaud's work, I want you to particularly point out and to pick up on the color that he's using, the way color is used. And it's a very personal thing how color is used, so I'm going to leave it up to the individual that over time, if you do this for a number of years, you tend to develop your own sense of color. And time will tell, but I at least want you to try to look for color. And instead of looking at grays or browns, think of them as having color. This is a work by a colleague of mine, Audrey Yushenko, who's a wonderful artist, who's known for doing still lifes and figurative work, but her still lifes have this kind of jewel-like quality, this opulence of light. So they're really about light, how light comes in this case through the window, passing through these glass objects, crystal forms, reflective surfaces. So everything is dazzling, it's like a diamond. Everything is just exploding with light and reflected light. So it's a wonderful look at how light affects our lives. This is another painting by Yushenko of a cityscape on the outside and then something very different on the inside. So the two different worlds. It's an interesting use of a window. But she does have this beautiful use of light and color, and she's not afraid to show color where you may not expect it. Like in this tablecloth, you see these bright purples in the shadows. Janet Fish is a New York painter who became well known for taking objects and blowing them up in size. So, but also kind of like the pop artist, calling attention to everyday objects in a different way. So these are large paintings. This is actually owned by the Fort Wayne Museum of Art. It's about 5 feet tall. So if you think of that, the water glasses stand at least 3 feet tall. Something you don't normally think of when you think of everyday water glasses on a table. But then also how light breaks up. It's like Yushenko, where you have this kind of diamond effect of strong darks and strong lights coming through the object. Or in this case, these vinegar bottles, where, and this painting actually is very big. This is 6 feet by 5 feet. So you have taken an everyday object and making it new or appear new to the viewer, how they perceive it. In this case, by scale and just by focusing in on the way light breaks up through them. Raymond Hahn is a New York painter. He had a different use of color. These are much more subdued. So they're harkening back to the Chardin, where they're more about value, where you have subtleties of grays. The objects themselves are inherently not colorful, but there's an elegance to these and a handsomeness because they're more about tone. They're more about the tonalities of these objects, subtleties of light and shadow, subtleties of reflections. And there's a beauty to these because of how he subtly uses all these components. This is a work by Marianne Neugen. She was a student of ours, and she's a very talented painter. But she provided these thumbnails, and it gives you a glimpse into how a painting begins and progresses. So in a separate video, I've done or a demonstration of beginning. So in your case, you're going to begin with using a viewfinder and doing thumbnail sketches. So you're going to have to do at least minimum three thumbnail sketches, very small. And this allows you the freedom to work on a composition and not get involved in the detail. 3 different compositions. And I need to approve the final sketch before you advance into the canvas panel. And then once you do, you're going to be using bind charcoal and applying it. And bind charcoal, if you've never used it, it's very forgiving. It allows you to change it and make adjustments. And then you can see below in the brown, this brown one, you're then going to use watered down acrylic with one color. In our case, we're going to use burnt umber, which is just a light brown, dark brown with white. And in various values, you're going to treat it like a charcoal drawing. So you're going to treat the surface of the canvas initially and just address the drawing, composition, and value. And when I want you to have a value structure in place so that it gives you a strong foundation upon which to add color. And that's really the benefit of what's called the grisaille, which is another name for monochromatic underpainting. And you can see even in all of Marianne's works here, they begin the same way. They begin with the charcoal sketch. And notice how there isn't a lot of detail in the sketch. It just gets the essence of the shape, the essence of the drawing, which is reinforced in that second step. And then before color is added. So you're really crystallizing what you put down initially. So if the drawing's off at the beginning, the drawing's going to be off when you get to the end. So this is why it's critical in the early stages to get the drawing proper, to get your perspective. If there are any proportional things or perspective issues, you need to get those straightened out, because the paint's not going to help you. It's not going to solve any drawing issues. So try to get the drawings fixed in the beginning. And you can see from past works, students have done very beautiful paintings. They've done great work. So you're going to be doing something very similar. I like to show this painting because the student had a very sensitive and a very successful approach to color by applying thin layers. And that's how we're going to work. We're going to apply thin layers of color so that in the end, these layers add up, they build up. It's a cumulative process. So thin layer of color on top of thin layer of color, and each layer doesn't have to be the same. They can be different layers of color, but it's like a veil of fabric or like thin veils of film. They multiply, they add up, and they create a new color, plus they have this 3-dimensional quality. And I think that's really something to strive for in your work from start to finish. So eventually we're going to get to color. But beneath all this, though, is this foundation of the drawing and of the charcoal sketch leading up to color. So for the first class or so, we're going to basically be doing that. So hopefully this reinforces the process, but also shows you some wonderful artists to find inspiration from.